There's a story out in Politico yesterday about the plans of the far right on Election Day, and it's not good. So they say neo-Nazi leader Andrew Anglin plans to muster thousands of poll watchers across all 50 states. His partners at the alt-right website, The Right Stuff, are touting plans to set up hidden cameras at polling places in Philadelphia and hand out liquor and marijuana in the city's ghetto on Election Day to induce residents to stay home. The National Socialist Movement, various factions of the Ku Klux Klan, and the white nationalist American Freedom Party all are deploying members to watch polls either informally or, they say, through the Trump campaign. The Oath Keepers, a group of former law enforcement and military members that often shows up in public heavily armed, is advising members to go undercover and conduct intelligence gathering at polling places. Wow. So what we have here is the rock has been overturned and the insects are scurrying all over the place. And lest you think these people aren't serious, and yes, I'm aware that lest is a weird word. We just had a story from this week about how a black church in Mississippi was burned, and on the building they wrote, "Vote Trump." So they're mobilizing, and they're coming out of the woodworks, and it ain't pretty. This dark underbelly of U.S. politics, which has always been around, but for a long time had been kind of, in the shadows, and I'm talking about the real extremist groups, KKK, neo-Nazis, white nationalists. They really are, just coming out and saying, here we are. We ain't going anywhere. And we got a candidate who we support now. In fact, the KKK newspaper, which, by the way, I didn't even know I had a newspaper, they endorsed Donald Trump. Now, it's not surprising that they would support Donald Trump, but what's surprising is they feel emboldened enough to write it in a paper and show the world and act like, well, we don't even think this is going to bring him down because we think everybody's coming out of the shadows now and we're no longer the pariah that we used to be. I mean, David Duke participated in the Louisiana Senate debate yesterday at a historically black college. This is where we're at, man. So it's happened. It's happened. Now, I've been perhaps overly kind to Trump supporters in continuing to bring up the fact that there are a lot of his supporters who just hate the establishment, and like Michael Moore has said, they view him as a human Molotov cocktail that they're going to throw through the window of the establishment. And when he goes out there and says, I'm against the TPP, look, America first, let's rebuild the infrastructure, let's not do all these wars. When he says stuff like that, people go, oh, he's looking out for me. So there's an economic angle to it as well, and people are struggling. That's still true. But what's also true is there are people who are really, really attracted to the other stuff he says. The stuff that we all look at, reasonable people look at and they go, wow, that's bad. So, for example, when he says, let's ban all Muslims from coming to the U.S., a complete and total shutdown of Muslims coming to the U.S. He just banned 1.6 billion people like that. That's what he announced it. Yeah, let's keep all Muslims out. Well, there are some people who, when they hear that, they go, yes, that's exactly what I want to hear. When Trump says, hey, I want to kick out all undocumented immigrants, all of them, all over 11 million of them. Doesn't matter if you worked here for 20 years and all you do is look after your family and you do pay your taxes. By the way, undocumented immigrants pay $11 billion in taxes every year. I don't care. I want you to get the fuck out of here. And let's be clear, I'm not talking about Hans and Franz and other, immigrants. I'm talking about, who I'm talking about. I'm not trying to round up the Canadians and ship them away. And, I mean, look, it was clear when he launched his campaign, the Mexicans, they're coming in here, they're criminals, they're rapists. I assume some are good people. So he flipped it. Notice that. It's not, hey, some are criminals and rapists, but most are good people. He flipped it. They're coming in here, they're criminals, they're rapists. I assume some are good people. So that's something where you're going to have white nationalists hear that. They had the fucking, just this week, in Utah, because Evan McMullin, an independent Mormon candidate, was doing well in the polls there and he could win Utah. white nationalists were doing robocalls for Donald Trump. This was unheard of not that long ago. But now they're coming out of the shadows because they think, I think more people agree with me than I thought agreed with me. So now I'm going to endorse candidates and push for candidates, and I don't think it's going to hurt them. Because I think we're onto a movement here, and the movement is openly bigoted. Openly bigoted. So we're at a bad place in that respect. What they're talking about here is armed far-right Trump supporters going to urban areas and intimidating voters. And doing it under the guise of, we're just making sure there's no voter fraud. Okay, we covered the studies on the show. There was one case of voter fraud in the news recently. You know who did it? A Trump supporter. But look, even that point is irrelevant because the overall studies on this have shown that between the year 2000 and 2014, with 1 billion votes cast, 1 billion, how many instances of in-person voter fraud were there? 14. There's a better chance of somebody getting struck by lightning twice than there being in-person voter fraud. That's what the odds are. But these people, KKK, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, are going to show up in predominantly black areas with guns to make sure, we're going to make sure nobody does voter fraud here. No, well, you're armed and you're intimidating them, and what you're trying to do is suppress the vote. So we're at a bad spot, man. Look, I do think there is an angle of Hillary got a lot of shit for saying, the Trump supporters are deplorables. But actually, people didn't dive into the nuance of the point that she made. Everyone knows I'm no Hillary fan. I rip her literally on a daily basis. Literally. I think she's super corrupt. But what she said is about half of Donald Trump supporters are genuinely hurt by the economy and they've fallen behind and they don't know where to turn. And so they go to this guy who's not the right answer, but they turn to him because they feel like maybe he is because he sounds like a straight shooter. So they're hurting economically and they want answers. So they turn to extremes. That's half his supporters. The other half are the basket of deplorables who are just bigoted and racist and sexist and homophobic and blah, 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 blah. That's not a crazy thing to say. Look at the polling data. Now, she still maybe overstated it a little bit, but, for example, what is it, 59% of Trump supporters think Obama's Kenyan? 59%! That is beyond stupid, and at this point, if you think that with all the evidence in the other direction, I do think you're a bigot. Because why else would you, I don't know, well, he's a Democrat and he's black, so he's got to be a foreigner. He's from Kenya. Okay, at this point, with all of the evidence, all the data, short-form birth certificate, long-form birth certificate, newspaper clipping that's the announcement in the Hawaii newspaper when he was born in Hawaii, if you still say after all that, yeah, he's Kenyan. Well, I think I know why you're saying that. What is it? 65% say he's Muslim? If that's not deplorable, what the fuck is deplorable? Because you only say these things because he's a black Democrat. You never said Bill Clinton might be a Muslim. You never said Bill Clinton might be a Kenyan. So why for Obama specifically are those the things? Because you're fucking bigots. But look, what I'm here to do is just wear it on your sleeve. At least I know that these guys are what they are, and they say they are what they are. I think what annoys me more is the people who are like, I'm not that. Don't call me bigoted. Even though we have a Kenyan Muslim president, and I still want to see his birth certificate, and even though he's shown his birth certificate a million times, and like Trump, I want to see his college records after he's proven sufficiently he's a citizen. Okay, what the fuck do you want me to call you? What do you want me to call you? Donald Trump was sued repeatedly for housing discrimination against blacks. They had a system where they'd put C for colored in the book, and they wouldn't allow them in the buildings. Now, you say, well, he wasn't convicted of that. He settled out of court because there was, quote, overwhelming evidence that indeed he did do housing discrimination against black people. No, don't call me bigot. Don't call him bigoted. Don't call me a bigot. Don't call him bigoted. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Maybe you're the bigot for accurately calling me a bigot. Maybe you're the bigot. Stop with the childish games. Just admit what you are. Some people are refusing to admit it. At least these guys admit it. But now we know the enemy we're up against. And fucking neo-Nazis going to do poll watching with guns? KKK poll watching with guns? You know, we do have names for these groups. Neo-Nazis and KKK people. Yet they're terrorist groups. Violence for political reasons. That's the definition of terrorism. What is the exact definition? Violence for political or religious reasons. That's terrorism. So these guys are, now they're saying, hey, we're just going to show up with the guns. We're not going to do violence. But these groups have a history of being violent. So who's going to watch the watchers? That's what they say. Oh, we're the poll watchers. That's what we are. No. This should be diligently taken care of by police officers. They should be there to make sure, look, man, you have a right to go anywhere and do whatever you want. But the second you start directly threatening people, the second you start doing physical altercations, voter intimidation, well, look, we're going to have to ameliorate this issue because that's unacceptable. So I do feel it is strange how Trump has mustered up many people based on genuine economic populism in his rhetoric. I don't think he's actually going to fix anything, but that's his rhetoric. So he's understandably garnered up support in that respect. But then let's not pretend like a lot of it isn't just based on the bigotry and the hatred and the xenophobia. Because now we know when you're organizing to this extent, you got neo-Nazis and KKK guys and Oath Keepers and militia people, and they're all coming together and they're admitting what they're coming together for. Well, then don't get mad at me, the messenger, for saying, "Oh, hey, you guys are a bunch of bigots." Get mad at them for being the bigots, unless of course you agree with them.